morning all. The next game in the Evolution of Style series that I'd like to show you is Mirza Onkan's encounter with a player representing the Latvian team, Matisons, Hermanis Matisons. Sultan playing for England on board one. Matisons won the Latvian Championship in 1924, and later the same year the first World Amateur Championship, organised in connection with the Olympic Games, the first unofficial Chess Olympiad in Paris. He was ahead of Colle and Max. He excelled rather at the endgame, and in this particular Olympiad he defeated, believe it or not, both Alexander Alekhine and Akiba Rubinstein in the endgame. As well as this, he also composed over 60 excellent chess studies, and that's probably what he's best remembered for. And the tragedy of Matisons, just 1 year later after this Olympiad, he died of tuberculosis in Riga in 1932. At that time, tuberculosis was a major killer. The BCG vaccine, which we're familiar with today, it was first used, for those interested, in 1921 in France, but only received widespread acceptance in USA, Great Britain and Germany after World War II. So World War II from 1939 to 45, a lot later really. So yeah, tuberculosis was a major killer. In respect to Matisons, maybe it's I think we should just check out those endgames he won. I've got the PGN file here of the Olympiad, so we'll just quickly check out Matisons against Alexander Alekhine first. We had this position just to see the endgame. Matisons had this position. He's centralizing his king here. Alexander played h5, and it looks as though this is pretty dangerous. There's this pin here. The pawns are being undermined with h5 tactically, but king e4 keeping things together. Temporary pawn sacrifice it becomes now after h to hg4. We see rook g1. So Matisons' king is very well prepared for the endgame against Alexander Alekhine playing black here for France. Alexander retreats the rook. Rook takes g4. We see check. King f3. And White's got a very comfortable position here, it seems. This knight's quite a pain. Alexander plays b5, maybe with an intention of trying to increase the pressure on the knight, or play for b4 later. Rook g2, rook d5, rook gd2, king f7, h5, and now Alexander goes for winning a pawn, but this endgame isn't good for him here. After rook takes d4, rook takes f5, rook d5. Okay, so tactically rook e5 might not be the best move here. It leads into a very bad king and pawn ending soon. After rook e7, rook 1 d5, rook takes d5, rook takes d5, a6, rook d6, and so this rook's more active here, and Alexander transitions into a king and pawn ending. We see after rook takes e6, king takes e6, king e4, and this is pretty dangerous, this position, believe it or not. You might think f5 check could be useful, but that wasn't played. King d6 was played, and after king f5, king e7, king g6, king f8, f5, Alexander's resigning this position. He's completely lost here. You know, if King J8 just dissolved this pawn and come back, it's going to be a case of zugzwang. So it was a bit of a disaster. What happened here? Did black have to lose this? Let's just quickly check this one out. Maybe this wasn't Alexander's best ever rook and pawn ending transition, but in this position, is it really that bad? It looks as though it is actually. You might find, strangely enough, if f5 check, king d4, I would have thought initially king d6, but no, I think we've got a case of zugzwang here with a4. It looks like a killer move. Maybe Alexander has seen this. This looks like a killer move, believe it or not. This pawn's turns out to be very useful for restraining this one. What does black do here? It's completely lost. If he allows the king in, just take f5's dropping. If he takes the pawn, just take on c4, and this is all losing for black. It's a bit of a strange, I think. So yeah, black clearly, I think he blundered with rook e5. If he just took and rook b7, just accepting the situation. That was actually Alexander Alekhine's only loss in this Olympiad, believe it or not. So that's an interesting endgame win for those interested. But let's have a look at the other one against Rubinstein while we're on the subject of Matisons. This is if we go to the endgame position, the transition to the endgame. There's pressure on f5. And Matisons plays to intensify that pressure, huge pressure. Okay. And here I think f4, queen takes g6, and then taking on f4 would win a pawn. So black's losing a pawn here, I think, in any case, as we see here anyway. So black's losing a pawn because of that intense pressure. But it's interesting because it's as though this is a little trap set by black to win the exchange, but it's a harmless winning of the exchange, because it's a couple of pawns for the exchange. It turns out after rook f6, I think is one of the best moves. Okay, and this is very dangerous now. Black tried in this position. If he takes, he gets mated. If he moves the queen, rook takes h6. That's interesting as well. He tried f3 check. Whoops. We're getting back to this. f3 check. So he's two pawns. He's going, well, king f2. Maybe he could have taken with rook takes f3. So we see queen h3, queen g6 check, and this endgame here, just not minding the queens coming off. He's getting the exchange for two pawns against Akiba, and here black's position is going downhill. White establishes a passed pawn now on that king side. That dangerous h pawn, and it's winning here. It looks as though this could be a completely one position now, because once that pawn reaches h7, the black rook's hopeless here. And again, we've got a case of the king infiltrating. So, okay, and after rook f1 check, bishop f5, Akiba actually resigned here. This e pawn's going to be the final decisive element of the position. So yeah, just for those interested, Matisons, it's a bit sad. We've got a major player there, a Latvian champion. Modern GM Shirov is Latvian, but yeah, his predecessors, unfortunately, at the time, tuberculosis was a major killer of chess players at the time. So anyway, we'll go to the Mir Sultan Khan game against Matisons. So Mir played d4, And we see knight f6, and now the quiet, and you could say almost like a polite move, knight f3 here, and an extremely polite move, e3. And you might think, why does Mir play like this? Well, the answer again is, he's adapting to this version of chess. Will it offer white an advantage? Well, actually, this is very interesting. Even with this super quiet system, white's position is very, very solid. The only major concession at the moment, well, this bishop might be a problem. How to develop that later. Black is putting attention on controlling the e4 square. It seems logical. It seems entirely logical for black to want to strengthen the e4 control here in this position. And black's next move, d5, it's met by a rule-breaking move, which is the start of a very easy position to play. I wonder if you can guess it. I've given you a little clue. If I give you 10 seconds, what does Mir Sultan Khan play in this position? Okay, knight e5. He's going to establish a reverse Dutch defence stone wall. He's going to play f4. This kind of Pillsbury bind, Pillsbury in the 1890s was playing this kind of bind position, but with c4 usually, which is a bit less stable in some respects. But with the pawn still on c2 here, this bind is still, it's very dangerous for black, especially if black's just going to routinely castle kingside. You might think, how dangerous? Well, okay, let's see. f4, black does castle kingside. He doesn't seem too concerned. Is white's routine going to be just castling rook f3 to h3, you might think? Actually, no. Queen f3 keeps an eye on e4 for a moment. Got three pieces eyeing e4 to try and prevent knight e4 from black. Knight fd7 trying to evict this pesky knight. There's a witty Tartiko quote about knights on e5, by the way. The great master places a knight on e5, checkmate follows by itself. I wonder how many of you are familiar with that quote. We see here queen h3 actually threatening literally checkmate on the move now. So that's defended with f5, and you might think, well, that's the end of the story. It's just closed up the lines. Can white really breach the black king position? Well, he reinforces the knight on e5 to start off with. After knight f6, we see this bishop move. So d2, okay. Bishop a6, and now not a routine move. And I wonder if you can guess this one. If you want to create an attacking path to the king here to open some lines to the opponent's king, what would you play in this position? If I give you 10 seconds here. Okay, Mir Sultan can't play rook g1. He's going to use this g file. He's going to use this knight to wrench open this g file. It's controlling the g4 square. Black played bishop takes d3, which solves this e4 weakness. It's covered now by a pawn. Okay, so queen e8, and the king just goes to e2 here. So it's protecting the pawn just in case queen b5 might be useful at some point, for example. But the queen's also defensive there a little bit. Knight bd7, queen h4. You might think it's quite curious. What's the idea of queen h4? You might think, well, okay, c5. Let's see, bishop c3. Black plays c takes d4, and we see bishop takes d4. After knight c5 is useful for the king to be protecting d3 as well as the knight, potentially. But now g4. Black takes on e5. It's recharged. Knight takes e5. After f takes g4, knight takes g4. This is all looking a little bit dangerous for the black king all of a sudden here. and still control of e5. You find this kind of polite positional control in Mir Sultan Khan's games. Often e5 is under control. The dark square strategy, the grip on the dark squares is evident from some of the openings he's playing. And they're not too tactical in nature at all, but yet he's got a very strong attack here, which black seems rather helpless to do anything about. After knight takes g4 especially, rook takes g4. White's just calmly doubling rooks now. And this is so convincing, believe it or not, that the former Latvian champion just is compelled to resign here. He resigns in this position. How does black actually defend this? If rook f7, we've got rook g6 surely as one idea with queen h8. This position, is it completely lost technically? I would assume just visually we've got some clues that it is completely lost, because what is this rook doing over here? What is this knight doing over here? We've got more pieces on the attack than there are on the defence from an intuitive point of view. Queen d7, we don't even have to take on g6 straight away, even though that might be quite strong. Or is it? It's still quite strong as well. A lot of things are winning here, but just putting pressure to threaten rook g6 as well. It's pretty convincing. There's just no defence to this attack crashing through. It's going to net a couple of pawns at least, and the attack's going to continue in this variation. So a very, very simply played opening, and one wonders, perhaps, although Mir Sultan Khan wasn't on the chess scene for that long, he must have had an impact, a dramatic impact, perhaps on certain players, and possibly it's linked with Tartakov's quotation about knight on e5. Games like this, it just looks as though it was a very, very easy game to play for white. And I remember Blitz, 5-minute Blitz specialists. I used to play 5-minute Blitz at this place called Checkers, and there was a Blitz player in 5-minute using a very, very similar system to this. It looks as though what is white doing? It looks passive, but if once white installs an entrenched knight, as soon as black plays d5, and the knight's entrenched like a reverse Dutch stone wall, this is incredibly annoying to play against, either in Blitz or in this case it was a long game, board one of an Olympiad. Very, very, very difficult system. Very, very closed, locked in. This knight, this spearhead, if ever there's a capture on e5, it's driving away the defensive knight, weakening h7. And this probably is why explains this example quite vividly. Tartakov's expression, the great master places a knight on e5, checkmate follows by itself. We've got some compelling evidence in this game. The h7 square is particularly vulnerable because of the implications of this knight, trying to get rid of this knight. And even if black shields h7, okay, maybe there's some better defences though. f5 wasn't the best defence. h6 maybe more prudent. But even so, if we continue this for a little bit, okay, this would be better than the game. Black may be overly committed with f5. I think we'll see the evaluation going up quite significantly. So even maybe g4 was possible, even in this position, to play g4 straight off the bat here. It's difficult for black to just have defensive resources here. White's using this g file quite simply. So anyway, we see the more patient knight df3, knight f6. Again, g4 could have been played here. Bishop d2, bishop a6. Now rook g1, preparing g4. Black took on d3. White's advantage is fairly persistent though, if we look at the evaluation. Why was there a need for queen h4? Is that a slight little mystery of this game? What is black actually threatening? I'm not really sure. If for example we played g4 here, let's go with this. Bishop takes. takes. Oh, we can just take on e5 at the moment and take on g4 in this scenario. So the queen going to h4, okay, could be useful for a pin potentially if the queen did go to e7 here. He's waiting for the right time now for g4. So here it's not the right time because black can just take on e5, or is it g4 here? Slight difference. If we try bishop takes e5 now, this should be okay for white. I think that's okay there as well. So okay, bishop c3 patiently. Well, he's putting this bishop's potentially x-raying g7, and as we saw in the game, it was useful on g7 pretty soon. It's got an open route on that diagonal, which black at this point wasn't too concerned about. But yeah, there's some major coordination with the rook and bishop here. And actually there's a very nice game, I think, in this Olympiad, again with this same theme of a rook and bishop coordinating on white's castle king position, another game which you may be interested in seeing as well. It's just a very simple way of attacking, based initially on a dark square grip of the position, and you get this coordination of the dark square bishop and the rook on the king's soft spots, particularly g7. So knight takes e5 here. White's advantage is huge actually after bishop takes e5. Even in this position, it's become quite dangerous. It seems knight c5 was a major inaccuracy actually. So he's taken the pressure off e5, which means g4 is even more effective than it was. So if black had maybe waited bishop c5, maybe this is a lot better, because we can answer now, I think, g4 with knight takes e5, and this might be more tenable. At least the bishop's blocked in here. Okay, so the way it was played, it was taking a piece away from the fence here. So we've got a numerical superiority, a clear numerical superiority being built up of attacking bits versus attacking defending bits. The knight coming to the queen side, g4 now. We've got quite a few attacking pieces visually on the king side, and the evaluation has just gone up massively for white here. So knight c5 doesn't help black's kingside defense, and it looks as though black is busted right here. So a very simple opening, leading to a great demonstration of Tartako's quote about a knight on e5, and showing the effectiveness of a very simple system conceptually, the reverse Dutch stone wall. But I think we're starting to get this picture of Mir Sultan Khan being this kind of polite positional player, excelling in quiet positions, really liking his dark square grips in particular with white. But there are some very interesting encounters we can still cover. For example, against Marshall, very fierce, aggressive player, to see how he handled that sort of opponent. That will be interesting maybe to look at as well. Okay, and the great Matisons as well, not just someone just to mention it in passing, had a fantastic Olympiad as well, as we saw, with the white pieces, beating two of the strongest players of that era, Alexander Alekhine, and that was Alekhine's only loss, and Rubinstein, so he was having a pretty good Olympiad as well. Comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much.